van to a villainous dictator who almost replaced Napoleon. The making of this time-traveling comedy was filled with bizarre twists, bankruptcies, and unexpected casting near misses that could have completely changed cinema history. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Fact 1. Hitler was almost the main historical figure. When writers Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson first drafted Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure back in 1984, they had a very different historical figure in mind for the duo to kidnap. Instead of Napoleon Bonaparte causing chaos at a bowling alley and water park, the original script featured Adolf Hitler. The early outline shows that Bill and Ted would have traveled to Nazi Germany in their time-traveling van, and after causing some trouble, they would have brought Hitler back to present-day San Dimas. The notes reveal that Hitler would have been stranded there while the boys continued their time-traveling adventure, and in one version, a popular kid from their school would have somehow become friends with the dictator. This friendship subplot apparently grew out of the writer's personal disdain for popular kids at school. However, as Solomon and Matheson continued developing the script, they quickly realized they had a serious problem on their hands. As Solomon later explained on Twitter, they eventually thought to themselves, "Actually, we can't do that," noting there were many reasons why this wouldn't work. The most obvious issue, as they mentioned in their home video commentary track, was that they couldn't have Bill and Ted paling around with lovable Hitler, which would have been completely inappropriate for a light-hearted comedy aimed at teenagers. So they made the wise decision to swap out Hitler for Napoleon Bonaparte, which not only solved the ethical problem, but also gave them the opportunity to create one of the film's most memorable jokes with the Waterloo Water Park scene. This change transformed what could have been a controversial disaster into the beloved cult classic we know today. Fact 2. The time machine was originally a van before the iconic phone booth became synonymous with Bill and Ted's time-traveling adventures. The script went through several different versions of what their time machine would actually look like. In the earliest spec script written by Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson, the vehicle for traveling through time was a 1969 Chevrolet van, and the movie was even titled Bill and Ted's Time Van, rather than Excellent Adventure. In this original version, the boys would borrow the van from their friend Rufus, who in early drafts was described as a 28-year-old high school sophomore rather than the wise future guide played by George Carlin. However, when the writers began rewriting the script for Warner Brothers, who showed early interest in producing the project, concerns arose about the similarities to another hugely successful time travel movie. Back to the Future had arrived in theaters in 1985 and made the DeLorean one of the most iconic time machines in cinema history, so using any kind of motor vehicle felt like it might come across as a ripoff. Director Stephen Herrick suggested changing the time machine to a phone booth instead, partly because he thought it could lend itself to something more like a roller coaster in terms of the visual effects. According to Alex Winter, Herrick also found the van concept too Scooby-Doo and wanted something more stationary and distinctive. Interestingly, the filmmakers were reportedly completely unaware that the British television series Doctor Who had been using a police telephone box as a time machine since 1963, so they thought they were creating something relatively original with the phone booth concept. Fact 3. The movie went bankrupt before release. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure had a surprisingly troubled journey to theaters that almost prevented audiences from ever seeing it on the big screen. The film was shot on an $8.5 million budget over a period of 10 weeks in 1987, with filming taking place primarily in the Phoenix and Tempe areas of Arizona, plus an additional 2 weeks in Italy. Everything wrapped up on schedule, and the movie was originally planned for a 1988 theatrical release through its distributor, De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, commonly known as DEG. However, disaster struck when DEG fell into significant debt in late 1987, and by 1988, the company had filed for bankruptcy. At that point, the film was stuck in post-production with no clear path forward. Director Stephen Herrick attempted to shop around the rough cut to other distributors, but the response was often confused, with executives asking him, "Are there kids that really speak like this?" many companies simply didn't understand the appeal of these lovable slackers. The most likely outcome at this point was a straight-to-cable release, which would have meant the film disappeared into obscurity. Fortunately, Herrick showed the rough cut to a test audience of volunteers pulled from local shopping malls, and their reaction was extremely enthusiastic, which sparked a small bidding war among production companies. Some of the former DEG executives had moved to Nelson Entertainment, and they partnered with Orion Pictures to secure the distribution rights for the film in 1988 for approximately $1 million. This allowed Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure to finally reach theaters on February 17, 1989, nearly 2 years after filming had completed. Fact 4. All the years were dubbed over. The lengthy delay between filming and release created an unusual technical problem that eagle-eyed viewers can still spot throughout the movie today. Since Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure was shot in 1987 and originally planned for a 1988 release, all the dialogue in the film naturally referenced 1987 as the present day. The script was written that way, the actors performed their lines that way, and everything was filmed with 1987 as the contemporary setting. However, when the bankruptcy of De Laurentiis Entertainment Group pushed the theatrical release back to February of 1989, the filmmakers faced an awkward situation where the movie would be releasing with dates that were already 2 years out of date. To fix this problem, the production team had to go back into post-production and redub every single reference to the year 1987, changing them all to say 1988 instead. This created noticeable lip-sync issues in several scenes throughout the film where the actors' mouths clearly don't match up with the audio coming out. One of the most obvious examples occurs early in the movie when Bill reads their history assignment aloud to Ted, saying the words, San Dimas, 1988. But if you watch his lips carefully, you can clearly see he's actually saying San Dimas, 1987. The dubbing was done as carefully as possible, but it's impossible to perfectly match lip movements after the fact, especially when changing a 2-syllable word like 7 to a 3-syllable word like 8. These mismatches appear multiple times throughout the film, serving as a permanent reminder of the troubled production history and the financial difficulties that nearly prevented this movie from ever reaching audiences. Fact 5. Keanu and Alex auditioned for each other's roles. One of the strangest twists in the casting of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is that the two lead actors initially auditioned for the opposite roles they ended up playing in the final film. Keanu Reeves originally went into his audition hoping to play Bill S. Preston, while Alex Winter was auditioning to play Ted Theodore Logan. Director Stephen Herrick and the casting team saw hundreds of actors during the audition process, asking each one to try reading for both parts to find the right chemistry. After reviewing all the audition tapes, writers Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson, along with Herrick, decided they absolutely wanted both Reeves and Winter in the film, but they felt the opposite casting would work much better for the characters they had envisioned. So the filmmakers made the decision to switch their roles without actually bothering to inform the actors ahead of time. When Reeves and Winter showed up for their wardrobe fitting, both of them naturally assumed they would be fitted for the character they had auditioned for. The confusion that followed has been recounted in several interviews over the years. According to Reeves, he only found out about the switch when he arrived at the fitting and discovered that Winter was being fitted for Bill's costumes instead of Ted's. Winter later described the moment in an interview, explaining that he was excited and ready to go, while Reeves looked completely miserable. When Winter asked what was wrong, Reeves said, "Yeah, but I'm Ted," to which Winter responded with confusion, saying he thought that was great. Winter tried to reassure him by pointing out that Bill and Ted were completely interchangeable characters anyway, and if Reeves really wanted to, they could just swap, and it wouldn't impact how either of them played the roles. Fact 6. The 7-hour audition marathon. The audition process that ultimately brought Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter together for the roles of Ted and Bill was far from a typical Hollywood casting call. Director Stephen Herrick had screened somewhere between 200 and 300 actors for the main roles, and 24 of them were called back for a final round of auditions. This final audition session turned into an extraordinary marathon that lasted approximately 7 hours, with actors being paired up in different combinations throughout the day to test their chemistry. Herrick later said he had an Abbott and Costello dynamic in his head and felt like they saw every young guy in Los Angeles during the search. Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter both happened to be among the first actors to arrive that day. And while they sat in the lobby waiting for the auditions to begin, they started talking and quickly discovered they had an unusual amount in common. Both were passionate about playing bass guitar, both loved motorcycles, and they came from surprisingly similar backgrounds, despite their different paths into acting. As the day wore on and they kept going back out to the waiting area between reading with different potential co-stars, they continued their conversation, discussing music and their shared interests. Producers noticed that every time they'd go out into the lobby, Winter and Reeves would be deep in the same conversation, and then they'd pause and say something like, "Oh, wait, dude, okay, I'll talk to you later about that," before heading in to read with another actor. Producer Scott Krupp later recalled that they'd come back out and immediately pick up where they left off. This natural rapport and genuine friendship that developed during the waiting periods translated perfectly into the chemistry that Herrick was looking for. By the end of that 7-hour session, it was clear that these two actors had found something special together. Fact 7. Director told them to channel Labrador Retrievers. Director Stephen Herrick faced an interesting challenge in guiding Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter toward the right tone for their performances as Bill and Ted. The characters needed to be likable and endearing, despite being dim-witted slackers who knew almost nothing about history or anything else, and finding that balance between stupidity and charm was crucial for making the movie work. Herrick worked closely with both actors throughout the production, trying different approaches to help them understand the energy and personality he wanted them to bring to these characters. Eventually, he came up with a phrase that became his go-to direction for achieving the exact tone he was looking for. Herrick called it the puppy factor, and he used this concept repeatedly when giving notes to Reeves and Winter during filming. As Herrick later explained in interviews, he ended up distilling his entire vision for the characters into one simple phrase that he used to tell both Alex and Keanu over and over again. "I need more Labrador Retriever." He felt that Bill and Ted were sort of like lovable Labrador Retrievers in human form, with that same kind of innocent, enthusiastic, loyal energy that makes Labs such popular family dogs. The comparison might sound strange at first, but according to Herrick, both actors immediately understood what he was talking about and were able to use that direction to find the right approach to their performances. This puppy factor helped them avoid making Bill and Ted seem mean-spirited or annoying, instead making them genuinely sweet and well-meaning, despite their complete lack of intelligence. Herrick's unusual direction encouraged both Reeves and Winter to feel free to improvise and be spontaneous on set, which led to some of the film's most memorable moments, including the entirely improvised Star Wars lightsaber fight sequence between the two friends. Fact 8. Pauly Shore almost played Bill or Ted. The role of Ted Theodore Logan could have gone to a very different comedian if the audition process had played out differently. Among the hundreds of actors who tried out for the lead roles in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure was Pauly Shore, the stand-up comedian who would later become famous for his own brand of lovable slacker characters in films like Encino Man and Biodome. Shore was heavily in contention for one of the two lead roles and came surprisingly close to being cast in the film. In an interview years later, Shore revealed that his audition went well enough to put him near the top of the list, but ultimately the studio decided to go with Keanu Reeves instead, partly because Reeves had already achieved some recognition after starring in the 1986 crime drama River's Edge. Shore later watched Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure for the first time and had a moment of realization, saying, "Oh my God, like, I am Bill and Ted." He felt that the characters were so close to his own real-life personality that it almost hurt to watch, and he pointed out that you can tell Reeves is acting when he plays Ted, whereas Shore felt he genuinely was that character in real life. The story didn't end there, though. In 1991, Shore was hired to host an MTV special called Bill and Ted's Bogus Premiere Party to help promote the release of the sequel, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. During this special, Shore took the opportunity to corner Keanu Reeves in a back room and brought up his failed audition on camera, creating an awkward moment where the two of them joked about how Shore didn't get the role. The interview was clearly uncomfortable for Reeves, but both handled it with good humor. Fact 9. Sean Connery was considered for Rufus. The role of Rufus, the wise time-traveling guide from the future who helps Bill and Ted pass their history class, could have been played by a very different kind of actor if the producers had gotten their first choices. Before George Carlin was cast in what would become one of his most beloved film roles, the production team pursued what they described as serious people for the part. According to Alex Winter, who discussed the casting process in a Reddit Ask Me Anything session, the producers were initially going after big-name celebrities, including none other than Sean Connery, the Scottish actor best known for playing James Bond. The list of actors they considered also included musicians Ringo Starr, the drummer from the Beatles, and Roger Daltrey, the lead singer of The Who, as well as actor Charlie Sheen. All of these potential choices would have given Rufus a very different energy than what George Carlin ultimately brought to the character. The casting of Carlin ended up being what Winter called a very happy accident that happened relatively late in the production process. In fact, the idea to cast Carlin didn't even come up until after filming had already begun. Someone on the production team, specifically producers Scott Krupp and Bob Court, who had previously worked with Carlin on the film Outrageous Fortune, suggested bringing him in for the role. Once Carlin took the part, director Stephen Herrick discovered that the legendary comedian approached it very seriously, was completely prepared for every scene, and didn't really like to improvise as much as Herrick had expected. Herrick admitted he thought Carlin would be more off-the-cuff and spontaneous, but instead the comedian stayed pretty tight to the script, delivering his lines with professionalism and precision. Fact 10. The phone booth was given away in a Nintendo contest. After Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure became a surprise hit, the franchise expanded into various forms of merchandise, including an official video game for the Nintendo Entertainment System called Bill and Ted's Excellent Video Game Adventure, which was released in 1991. To help promote the release of this game, Nintendo Power Magazine, which was the official Nintendo magazine at the time, decided to run a special contest with an incredibly unique grand prize. They offered to give away an actual screen-used phone booth prop from Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, the sequel film, to one lucky winner. The prize came with an added bonus. Nintendo Power promised to install it as a working telephone in the winner's home, and would even pay the phone bill for an entire year. The contest was won by a young video game enthusiast named Kenneth Grayson, who became an instant celebrity in his neighborhood when the massive phone booth arrived at his house. However, getting the prize into his home turned out to be a significant challenge. The phone booth was far too large to fit through Grayson's bedroom door, so his father had no choice but to remove the window frame and all, creating a gaping hole in the side of the house, and then hoist the enormous prop through the opening. One can only imagine the father's thoughts during this process, presumably wondering why Nintendo couldn't have just sent a check instead of this massive wooden structure. In 2011, someone claiming to be Kenneth Grayson did a Reddit Ask Me Anything session where he shared specific details about winning the contest, including the revelation that the phone booth wasn't actually a functioning telephone as Nintendo had suggested, and he was forced to purchase a real phone to install inside it. Fact 11. Joan of Arc was played by a Go-Go's member. Among the various historical figures that Bill and Ted collect on their time-traveling adventure, Joan of Arc stands out not just as a legendary French military leader, but also because she was played by someone with her own significant place in music history. The role of the sword-wielding medieval warrior was given to Jane Wiedlin, who was far better known as the rhythm guitarist and founding member of the Go-Go's, one of the most successful American new wave bands of the 1980s. The Go-Go's had topped the charts with hits like We Got the Beat, Our Lips Are Sealed, and Vacation, making Wiedlin a recognizable figure in the music world. By the time she appeared in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure in 1989, she had already left the band in 1984 to pursue a solo career and had released successful singles like Rush Hour, which peaked at number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100. Her acting credits also included memorable small roles in the film Clue, where she played the singing telegram girl, and Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. This casting created an interesting musical connection in the film because Keanu Reeves was also a bass player and was in a band at the time of filming. So when the phone booth lands in medieval France and Ted extends his hand to help Joan of Arc climb aboard, it's actually the bassist from what would later become the band Dogstar reaching out to the bassist and rhythm guitarist from the Go-Go's. Weidlin later said of her 1980s acting career that it turned out to be much harder than it looks, and as much as I enjoyed those experiences, I don't think I'm very good at it. But fans of the film would strongly disagree, as her energetic and spunky portrayal of Joan of Arc remains one of the movie's most memorable performances. Fact 12. The Genghis Khan date is completely wrong. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure contains a significant historical error involving one of the most famous conquerors in world history that creates a major continuity problem in the film. When Bill and Ted travel back in time to collect Genghis Khan from medieval Mongolia, the on-screen title card clearly displays the year 1209, which actually falls within the correct historical period since Genghis Khan ruled the Mongol Empire from 1206 until his death in 1227. The filmmakers got this part right, showing the fearsome warrior in the middle of what appears to be a post-conquest feast, and Bill and Ted successfully lure him into the phone booth using a Twinkie as bait. However, the error appears later in the movie during the big presentation at San Dimas High School. When Bill and Ted introduce Genghis Khan to their classmates and teacher, Bill clearly states that they picked him up in medieval Mongolia in the year 1269. This date is historically impossible because Genghis Khan had been dead for 42 years by that point, having passed away in 1227 from causes that historians still debate, with theories ranging from falling off his horse to disease. In the year 1269, the Mongol Empire was actually being ruled by Kublai Khan, who was Genghis Khan's grandson and the founder of the Yuan dynasty in China. So either Bill and Ted somehow traveled back in time and accidentally grabbed the wrong Khan entirely, or this was simply a mistake in the script that nobody caught during production. Some fans have suggested that this error was intentional, serving as a callback to the 69 dude joke that appears earlier in the film, but whether the wrong date was deliberate or accidental remains unclear. Fact 13. Napoleon's water park scene references. His real defeat, one of the most memorable sequences in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, involves Napoleon Bonaparte having the time of his life at a water park in San Dimas. But this seemingly silly scene actually contains some clever historical references that many viewers might miss. After Ted's younger brother Deacon abandons Napoleon at a bowling alley, Bill and Ted track down the French emperor at a local water park that's ironically named Waterloo, which is a direct reference to the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, where Napoleon suffered his final and most famous military defeat. The filmmakers clearly had fun with this historical irony, showing the great military commander sliding down water slides and having philosophical conversations in French with a 7-year-old girl about the transcendent experience of zooming down into the water below. The historical references don't stop there, though. Later in the film, during the big presentation at San Dimas High School, Napoleon takes his turn to contribute to Bill and Ted's report by presenting what appears to be a new battle plan. If you look closely at the visual aids he's showing, complete with arrows that look like paths on a water slide, you can see that Napoleon is actually laying out the French invasion of Russia, which was one of the most disastrous military campaigns in history. This invasion, which took place in 1812, resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of French soldiers and marked the beginning of Napoleon's downfall. Ted looks up at the maps during this presentation and says, "I don't think it's going to work." And he's absolutely correct in his assessment. The filmmakers clearly did their research and embedded these historical jokes into what appears to be just a silly comedy, rewarding viewers who pay attention to the details. Fact 14. The phone booth was called the Death Box. While the phone booth time machine became one of the most iconic props in 80s cinema, the actors who had to work with it during filming have much less fond memories of the experience. The phone booth plays a central role in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and director Stephen Herrick insisted that there needed to be scenes showing Bill and Ted along with their entire ensemble of historical figures, including Socrates, Abraham Lincoln, Billy the Kid, Beethoven, Joan of Arc, Genghis Khan, Sigmund Freud, and Napoleon, all crammed together inside the tiny booth for some of the film's most memorable images. However, filming these scenes was extremely unpleasant for everyone involved. The cramped quarters meant that 9 or 10 people had to squeeze into a space designed for one, and according to the cast, the phone booth gave off foul, sweaty smells that made it nearly impossible to stay inside for extended periods. Keanu Reeves later recalled that the small space actually helped the cast figure out how to literally fit together and created a real cooperation among everyone, but Alex Winter had a less romantic take on the experience. He described how they were all stuck in a regular phone booth, wearing their boiling hot costumes with varying degrees of body odors intermingling in the confined space. The experience was even worse during the filming of the Circuits of Time sequences, where the phone booth needed to appear as if it was hurtling through the time stream. To achieve this effect, the booth was mounted on a hydraulic gimbal unit against a green screen in a studio in Outer Tempe, Arizona, with the entire cast duct taped to the rickety contraption that kept malfunctioning. Because of all these hardships, the cast and crew gave the phone booth prop a new nickname that stuck throughout the production: the Death Box. Fact 15. The writers wrote the script in 4 days by hand. The screenplay that would eventually become Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure had surprisingly humble origins that reflected the low-budget, scrappy nature of the entire production. Writers Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson, who were classmates at UCLA, had developed the characters of Bill and Ted through improvisational comedy sketches. They performed starting in 1983. The duo would get together and improvise as a couple of guys who knew absolutely nothing about history but would talk about it anyway, and these performances eventually convinced them that the concept could work as a feature film. In early 1987, they decided to sit down and actually write the screenplay. Their writing process was about as far from a modern Hollywood development room as you could get. Solomon and Matheson met at a series of local coffee shops around Los Angeles, and over the course of just 4 days, they hand-wrote the entire screenplay on scraps of notebook paper. They would pass a pen back and forth, with one writer composing dialogue until his hand got tired, then handing the pen to the other writer who would continue where they left off. According to Solomon, they could write so quickly because they knew the characters so well from performing them in improv for several years. They completed what they called Bill and Ted's Time Van in less than a week of actual writing time. Some of these original handwritten notes and early draft pages were later included as special features in the 2005 home media release called Bill and Ted's Most Excellent Collection, giving fans a glimpse at how the script evolved from those coffee shop sessions into the cult classic film.